Welcome back, Inebri-ites. This is Andy, of course, and this is actually the first episode that I've recorded in 2022. And for our regular listeners, they know we try to bring an assortment of creative types, writers and musicians and actors, and we just lump them all into one human being this time with Rob Zabrecky. Welcome to the show, man.
Nice to be here.
Yeah, I was actually kind of poking around the internet, checking out some of the things that you've done, and your PR company sent me over the brief synopsis of who you are. And the thing that struck me that I was most excited about was that you work at the Magic Castle.
I do.
So that's something I've only recently found out about, maybe in the last 2 or 3 years, and I'm really fascinated. I'm a fan of magicians. I love Penn and Teller's Fool Us, which you've also been on. So this is kind of like a chicken and the egg. Like, what came first? Was it magic? Was it music? Was it acting? Like, where did you first get the performer bug?
Definitely with music. I got the music bug first, and for the first, since I can remember, I mean, I wanted to just listen to records. And when I was old enough to have this conceit that I could maybe even play music, started playing in bands, and kind of thought that was my life course for 27 years, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then I stumbled into magic, and the course of my life changed.
So do you find it scratches the same itch in a different way, or are they kind of the same experience performing that? How would you compare the two? Because it seems so polar opposite of music. To me is something that you can listen to over and over and over again, but I feel like a magic trick you don't necessarily want to see over and over again, because then you start to kind of maybe put the pieces together.
In that regards, yeah, you're totally right. Magic is, in my opinion, meant to be this ephemeral thing where you can certainly see bands, and hopefully they're going to do it, different interpretation of what of their records. But I think magic is very different in that respect. But if you think about the idea of a performer and somebody who wants to sort of sit under the spotlight, and whether it's playing music or magic or dance or theater or even TV and film acting to a degree, is that same look at me, mom, I'm important.
Yeah.
I have something to share. I have something to prove. I have something to, I like doing this for one reason or another. So I think that in that regards, it's very much the same. And so when I switched over from wanting to play music to wanting to be a magician, performance wise, it was it was the same thing. We would prepare for an event, and then you do the set event, and then figure out what went right and what went wrong, and then try to do a little bit better the next time.
The thing that I found from watching magicians, and I find it interesting, is it seems like that a large number of the tricks that magicians do are almost like everyone's working with the same handful of tricks, and they're kind of skinning them to either appear different or put their own twist on it. And you kind of created a character, stage persona of Zabrecky, which is kind of like a creepy, weird. He's making me feel kind of like Addams Family vibes kind of thing. Was that something that you went to right away? When you were getting into magic, were you Zabrecky and he's going to be like this, or did that kind of develop over time?
It developed over time, although I did realize pretty early on in magic that like music, there's a certain number of chords and instruments that we have available, to us to express our tunes. And in magic, there's a certain number of magic principles that we have to do that as well. So, toolbox to work with. And I realized pretty quickly in magic, very much so, and in music to many degrees, that it's all about the spin you put on it. You know, what is your aesthetic to this? What kind of stories are you trying to tell? And I coming to magic later, I knew I wasn't going to be, nor did I really want to be a shredder with like doing card tricks and coin tricks. That was never the goal, the end goal with what I was trying to achieve. But that it was an art form and that I could see myself in it. I could sort of tell stories to degrees, and even eventually what I ended up doing was creating this kind of outsider character that you kind of described as the Zabrecky character, the odd man, as he's pretty well known in magic. And he's, you get to write, produce, direct, and act in magic. And those are key things in self-expression.
Sorry, you blipped out for a little bit there at the end. I think I might have it's fine. Like, I think I missed the key because I got write, direct, and act. So is it that you kind of get to do all those around that one character?
Yeah, I think I said something like those are key things in self-expression.
Yeah. It's really interesting to see how. And it's funny, like I didn't really think about it today about how there are those parallels in music and magic where it is the same, chords, and everyone kind of has their own style, and there are some styles that are the same, and there are some styles that are kind of like, well, it's a little bit of rap and reggae, and it kind of, especially today, I feel like when I was a kid, you'd go into the record store and there was country, rap, pop, and I think like hard rock or maybe heavy metal, and that was it. And now it's like I don't even feel like you could divide a record store into subgenres anymore. Is there kind of like there's mentalism and there's sleight of hand and card tricks? Do you feel like in magic there's kind of you stay in your lane, or is there more experimental and blend them together?
I'm all up for blending. To me, the best the magic performances and performers that I sort of seem to follow and go back to over time employ a variety of material in their shows. Penn and Teller are probably a good example because people partially because a lot of your listeners would know who they are, but they do everything. Those guys, they employ classic magic. There is mentalism. There is great sleight of hand. There's the most theatrical presentations of magic routines that some of the best that I've ever encountered. And that's and I think part of what makes them so great is that they do pull from so many different places to make their performances feel like a movie, or listening to a great song that has a certain number of dynamics to it that is appealing.
And the thing I love about them is they are so loved in the magic community and outside the magic community, but they're so themselves to the point where they break that unwritten rule, or it's probably written, don't a magician never reveals secrets. They'll be like, no, we'll show you how the trick is done, and you're going to be just as entertained seeing the process of them doing a can't remember what trick it was, but it had Penn like crawling around inside like a translucent box, like that was the stage itself. Right. And they just flat out showed you how it was done, and it was fascinating, and they're such groundbreaking talent.
Yeah, of course. And then they might reveal how one effect is done. They're going to entirely fool you at the end with some Hitchcockian sort of twist where you're like, oh my god, this it really is an art form, and I can really love magic because of people like those guys.
So how did you get involved with the Magic Castle, and can you tell us a little bit of what it's about? Like, I know vaguely what it's about, and there's like certain, like there's the pub, I think there's like a public area, and then there's like magicians only, and to get like an owl in the mail or something.
Boy, you've kind of got some wrong information there.
I know very little
Yeah.
about it. It just sounds like a
Yeah,
fascinating,
I'd be happy to tell you, a little bit about it. First of all, I got involved with Magic Castle because I live and I'm from Los Angeles,
Mhm.
so it's always been in near proximity. It's located in the Hollywood Hills, foothills, not too far from say Hollywood and Vine, and it's always been there. I've always known about it. It's a Victorian mansion that sits on a public street, Franklin Avenue, and so until I became interested in magic that I learned that the Magic Castle is a private club. It was established in 1963 by these two brothers whose father had this dream to have a magic club, and he was a magician, and they came from sort of a vaudeville background in LA, Pasadena, and Hollywood, and so they started this. They in the early 60s they found this dilapidated Victorian mansion that was built in 1908, and they were able to lease it out as to fulfill their father's dream to have this private magic club for magicians and their guests. So it was a membership thing where you could, for a nominal fee, you could become a member and you could bring a certain number of guests each night. And you would enter this spooky mansion, and there would be areas where there would be, say, close-up magic, where you'd see coin tricks, card tricks, things that were done up close in very intimate settings, and then stage magic, where you could see, let's just say a woman saw in half, or larger scale prop related things. And then in the mid 70s, they expanded the club due to its just being downright popular. It really became a mecca for magicians worldwide to sort of flock to this place. It was, the kind of the CBGB of magic in the 60s. So that said, when they expanded, 1977, 78, when they opened up a room called the Parlor Prestidigitation. And this parlor was a room for stand-up magician, comedy magicians, kind of the middle ground between, say, close-up and stage. We call it parlor or platform style magic. And that's kind of that's the realm that I sort of fell into, was in between those two realms. So yeah, it was a hit on the magic scene. People went crazy to go there. Ricky Jay came from the East Coast and came to study with a man named Di Vernon, who was, kind of the Lou Reed of magic. He was by all means original. He had invented a lot of card tricks, a lot of close-up magic, and really helped push magic in the right direction, and was kind of the almost patriarch of this club. And so people came to study with him from all over the country and even worldwide. He became the guy, and it became the place where 7 nights a week you can go to see magic. There's a dress code, so you have to dress up. It's coat and tie for men, no jeans, no sneakers, cocktail attire for women. So people are getting dressed up to go to this place. Eventually they open a restaurant. And so it's now structured so you can wander around this club where there's not separate rooms for different people. It's definitely, we're gonna go see a close-up show at 7, and then we'll have dinner at 8, and then see the big stage show at 10 o'clock, and then maybe we'll see a magician doing impromptu card tricks in this little area over here. Meanwhile, again, you're in this Victorian mansion, and there's all sorts of, you have turn of the century lithographs, beautiful graphic art from the golden age of magic, which is, say, 1850 to 1950. So you can see, prints of, Houdini and people like Thurston or Carter or Chung Ling Soo, a whole cast of really interesting magicians, all the way up until till today. So you might see a poster for someone like a popular recent magician, someone like Derek DelGaudio might have a piece of artwork up there related to one of his shows. So there's a lot of ephemeral pieces as well. And it really honors all kinds of magic, and it's the Mecca. It never shut down, and it's gone through, waves of being popular and unpopular, where magic has kind of gone through its own sort of, waves of popularity in say pop culture. About 10 years ago, Neil Patrick Harris, the actor, the television actor and magician, became the president of the club,
Right.
and had a resurgence of his own from being a child actor or wherever.
I think that was about the time he was on How I Met Your Mother.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, he was in the spotlight quite a bit and going on television shows and sort of promoting not only the shows he was working on, but shows like but the Magic Castle as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the world was just ready for it. People were kind of a little more curious about magic at that point. So it opened up the popularity of the club, and now, at least pre-pandemic, there's a big waiting list to become a member, and it's very crowded, and it's not hurting for membership. It's great.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I feel like there's been kind of it's hard to say. It's like sometimes my focus is on something and I'm like, oh my God, this is like so popular, or I'm just paying attention to it. But
that's for sure.
It seems like there's
that's
a lot
my whole
of
life in a nutshell.
It seems like there's a lot of interest in magic, where people are doing kind of camera tricks and stuff on either TikTok or YouTube or those type of things. Is that kind of looked upon this as still magic, where they're doing kind of like camera tricks and perspective tricks?
I can't really answer that because I don't I don't know what looked upon is. I can only answer that through the filter that I see things.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't look at stuff like that generally. TikTok, I'm not I don't pay a lot of attention to that stuff, but it might be very popular, and some certain people might revere it as magic or magical.
Yeah. But you are on YouTube. I was actually just watching. Is it The Other Side?
The Other Side with Zabrecky, my seance show. Yeah, of course.
That's kind of it's fun, and I think I've always been fascinated with the macabre, and I grew up with shows like Ripley's Believe It or Not and stuff like that. And I think that's kind of where my interest in magic kind of connects, because there's a lot of crossover in things like seances and Houdini. And so was it a Houdini inspired seance show? Like how did you come up with that?
Not at all. It was not at all inspired by Houdini, although Houdini plays a great role in the world of spiritualism from the 1920s. Undoubtedly, he's definitely one of the figures that if you're talking about that stuff, you can't not bring him up, because he was a staunch non-believer of ghosts and spirits, and the seances that were really popular during that wave of seances.
But he was also close friends with oh my God, the guy who wrote Sherlock Holmes, who was
Arthur Conan Doyle.
Thank you.
Yeah,
who was
the believer. Yes,
yeah.
and their friendship ended because Conan Doyle believed that the only way that Houdini could have achieved any of those magical effects or escaped from any of those things that he was shackled up in was through by dematerializing his body and of course rematerializing other places, and that's just not how it worked.
Yeah.
So anyway, that friendship ended sort of famously because of that. But the reason that I created that show with my wife, because she helped me create the magic character that is Zabrecky, and that you kind of see on that show On the Other Side with Zabrecky. And for many years, probably 15 years, I did it live. I performed that live at the Magic Castle and at magic festivals and magic conventions, and even some comedy festivals,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. I was kind of, the character could be. It was a good puzzle piece for a variety show, because there was generally nothing like it,
Yeah.
So it could fit in as the oddball act or whatever. And I really enjoyed doing it live. And I'd always thought it was a live thing. I didn't really want to. I don't know. I just never really visualized it as a camera, like as a something that would live in TV or film so much, at first anyway. And so we thought, let's find a place for this character to have a little spot on the internet or on television. You create something and you kind of do what you can with it. It is as much fun as it was, and as successful in the way that I define success with that character. Create a show with it and see, what we can do with that. So anyway, so we thought of the stupidest idea that we could think of was to have a seance show where guests could come in my living room and reach out to a spirit of their choice. And that would give us the opportunity to connect with sort of people that we knew in showbiz that were fun, that were going to be interesting, and kind of make a show that was provocative and interesting, where we could employ music that we liked and graphics. And it came back to that write, produce, direct, act thing, where we could make this whole thing and wrap it up into a tight little package, which we did. And that's the show. We took a version of it around to the networks, and they were all scratching their heads going, what, this is, without saying it so much, that they kind of just thought it was as stupid as we thought it was, but didn't want to sort of engage us to make it on a soundstage. So we made it in our living room, which was, again, just probably more fun and more interesting, because we had zero interference.
Yeah.
From any, there was nobody else besides my wife and I and a friend that helped us make it sort of pitch into the editing, and the way that made it the way that it sort of ended up turning out. And we got to use, for the most part, two of my favorite composers, band called Monitor. We used their music to death. They put out Monitor was an LA band, 79 to 83, I think, in LA, something like that. And they released one album in a 45, and it's just loaded with some of the greatest music of all time, in my opinion. And then a buddy of mine, longtime friend named Brad Lehner, who is an avant-garde sort of composer and had many bands, but he's more now into I don't know, avant soundscapey kind of stuff, music concrete, synthesizer mashup, really far out stuff. And so we were able to put this music in that we really liked, and just made this kind of these little montages of things that kind of made the collage that is that show, Other Side with Zabrecky.
Yeah, it's really cool, and it's got a real like vintage throwback vibe to it, with kind of like the weird sound skips and crackles and those kind of the stuff you would see in old film, archival type stuff. I thought it was really great, and it's such a good time to have an idea like that the studio is going to look at and go, I don't know what that is, because then you can just put it together yourself, and there's platforms like YouTube and whatnot that you can put it out on. It's a fun time to be a creative person, because I feel like the bar for entry is so much lower. Where, I mean that in a positive way.
No, I completely agree, and that's true for musicians as well. I mean, I think back when I was playing in bands, it was there was definitely the 4-track school of people kicking it down to the Tascam and putting out lo-fi stuff and making 45s and kind of in that DIY world. But there was also bands going into studios and having to negotiate creative terms with record labels and down to their artwork and all that kind of stuff. And now you really don't need it. And if it's good, people seem to find their way to it eventually. And even if it's certainly if it's not good, people can still find their way to it. But
And good's very subjective.
Yeah, it's very subjective. But I think now everyone's kind of pretty much got a fair shot, which I think is great.
Yeah. What are you listening to now? Is there like something that's jumping out at you?
Always. I listen to a lot of music. I've gone back to a record that had a pretty profound effect on me when it came out. The band is called Slint. They're from Louisville, Kentucky, and they put out 2 albums, late 80s, and then I think their second album, Spiderland, came out in 91. Anyhow, a guy called Lance Bangs did a documentary called Breadcrumb Trails, and about the band, and it kind of just reopened my sort of admiration and curiosity about the band. They're very mysterious. They made this album called Spiderland, and then they disbanded, and it's a really unusual a record, and really captures a great time and place for what was kind of going on at the time in the music sort of landscape of the late 80s, early 90s, in what some people would probably call last wave of underground, pre-internet stuff. So I've been listening to them quite a bit. I think that's really took a kind of a deep dive. When they reissued the record, there's B-sides and all sorts of other alternate recordings, and they put out a previous album that Steve Albini produced called Tweeze. I hadn't really given that much listen, and it was really, when I go on a dive, it's usually the tear can last from 3 weeks to 30 years. Yeah. Some bands I'm always going deeper and deeper into. But yeah, I'd say that Slint is probably been most recently getting a lot of my attention.
Now, how do you intake music? Are you like a active listener, like where you sit in a room and you're not doing something, maybe looking at the album art or something and listening to the music? Or are you more passive where you're like, it's on in the background while you're working on something else? Like, do you have a preferred way to... I like to be honest, I like it on in every way. I listened to the Slint record the other night at 3 a.m. when I couldn't sleep. And I had a very, very close connection with that record, like listening to it on the headphones. It was quiet. It was dark, and I just really was transported into another world through their music, but in general, like that kind of headphone at night listening. I don't do a lot of that, but I certainly engage that. I bike ride a lot. So for me, I've got Spotify account with 1,300 songs, liked songs. So I hit shuffle on that, and it's, 1 minute it's Ethiopian jazz, and the next minute it's hardcore. The next minute it's 60s Jamaican ska, and then Jim Croce pops up, and it's like, I'm all over the place. And so I like. I do like the variety of music, and so I would say I listen to a lot on headphones, bike riding. Let's see, for during the pandemic, there was a show on WFMU out of New York that I'm I wouldn't say regular listener to, but I like that station a lot. And Ira Kaplan, the 1/3 of the band Yola Tango, had a show that he did on Tuesday nights from 6 to 9 or something, at least in LA, and it was amazing. And he played the greatest music, and so my wife and I would listen to his show and we'd cook. We were like making food, weird recipes from all over the world, foods we'd never tried, things like made pretzels, for example, from scratch. African stews, you name it. We were like, we were trying all kinds of crazy stuff.
And we were doing that by listening to his radio show, and it was really a thing of beauty, like, because his music, his scope of music is much broader than mine, and I would say maybe most people's. The guy is a true encyclopedia of what I would call really good music. So I was like running over and going, "Oh my God, I never heard this Kink song. This is so weird." And then, oh, what's this Perry B-side I've never heard. So it's constantly like taking notes, and then during the week going back and finding these recordings, and some can be found and some aren't, because they're only on vinyl 45s with limited pressing. And it's like great world of like, it was truly a musical resurgence for me, because I think we all get comfortable with listening to our same 200 records that we like, or certain genres or whatever. But with I think Ira just reminded me of how much music is out there, and how much great music there is out there. And just when you think you've got a handle on certain artists or genres, there's always more.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite byproducts of having this podcast is we get to talk to a lot of musicians, and just there's so many that I've never even heard of, and then you talk to them, and they're far bigger, or more widely known than you would think. At the very beginning of the pandemic, I got to interview this guy Red from a band called Red Gold Green, and their albums were produced by Pharrell, and Dave Grohl played drums on their album. It's like they're a well-known band, never heard of them. And so then it's like you kind of discover this band, and you meet them, and then you listen to them, and you're like, wow, so okay, now there's I've just added this. It's almost like, oh, I've just added a new baseball card to the collection. Okay, there's another band that I like, and so I love discovering new music, and I'm definitely gonna have to check out that radio show.
Yeah, it's called Ira the K. Mm-hmm. Ira the K on WFMU, and it is WFMU is archived really well. So a lot of independent radio stations and college radio stations don't have things that their act together like WFMU does, and it's so great, because you can actually click on there's all sorts of you can interact with it. You can open up windows and download stuff, and really take a deep dive into, if there's something you're interested in. It's really easy to kind of see what it is. And his commentary, of course, is amazing. There's certainly one of my favorite. Yellow Tango is one of my favorite bands, I would say, of the past 40 years, 30 years. I don't know. But yeah, it's great when you discover it is very much like you have this, it's a great feeling to discover new music. There's kind of nothing like it. And even I
think my favorite part of it too is then I get to go to my friends and be like, oh, you know what? You're not listening to that you should be. And there's friends that are like, great fan, like whatever. But then there's a little dive bar right around the corner from where I am. It maybe seats maybe 20 people. It's just as divey as they get. Uh-huh. And one of the bartenders there, Trevor, is a big music fan, and like we'll just start kind of going back and forth, and we'll just start playing whatever, in this bar, and people be like, what are we listening to? And they're like, don't matter, listen to it. It's just, yeah, I love that kind of sharing of kind of unknown.
It's amazing. Yeah. The best is when someone like Trevor goes, you don't know that record?
yeah.
You're like, oh yeah, no.
Yeah. or the worst, or like you're like, oh, I got an awesome one, and you'd be like, you should check out. And he's like, yeah, I've listened to that. And you're like, damn it.
Yeah, what are you, stupid?
Yeah.
What's that joke? How many indie rockers does it take to screw in a light bulb?
How many?
You don't know.
I love that.
That's pretty good. Yeah, it speaks volumes of the kind of sort of a world that I was very familiar with, and not entirely entrenched in, but definitely was on the outskirts or woven into the fabric of that late 80s, early 90s independent music world of in LA,
Yeah. Well, that was the place to be, with the bands.
Yeah,
We
it
didn't have
was.
much of a music scene here in Boston at that time. It seemed like it was all West Coast.
I mean, I guess I don't know. There's plenty of bands came out of Boston that I like, but I think LA certainly is on the map for bands would stop here, and it was it was always a hub. Kind of had to come through, and from '89 to I don't know 92, 93, I helped some college friends or junior college friends, community college friends, open a nightclub gallery, kind of art gallery, coffee bar called Jabberjaw, which was an all ages venue, and bands were playing there like crazy. We it started off kind of with a small stage.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of geared for more acousticy small performances, and then in no time it expanded. The stage expanded, not the actual venue.
Yeah.
But bands like Nirvana played there.
Oh, wow.
And all kinds of touring acts of that realm were coming through. So it was a good sort of time to see lots of music and being kind of around for that.
Yeah, I think it's exciting to see like that kind of venue sprout up. There's one right up the road here in Pembroke. It's called Soundcheck Studios, and they the owners had kind of like this warehouse type thing, and they wanted to put in rehearsal studios. So they put in a bunch of rehearsal studios for bands, and then one of them was like, hey, it'd be kind of cool if we had like a little stage in the front area where maybe like on a Friday night one of the bands could perform, kind of knock the dust off or just get some practice or whatever.
Yeah.
And it held, I don't know, maybe 200 people.
Mm-hmm.
And so they got a beer and wine license so you could have some drinks. And during COVID, now there's a recording studio in there. They have a huge venue, full stage and lighting, and they're funny. They're like, we opened band rehearsal space, and now we're nightclub owners, and like we don't know how it happened. And they're starting to get traveling bands, and it's really exciting.
Yeah.
So where can our listeners go to find out more about you? Is there a website? You said you don't do social media too much. Is that?
I don't have a website. No, I decided. I mean, I a couple of years ago, I had written a memoir about growing up in Burbank and sort of having these experiences as a youth, my misspent youth, kind of out on the West Coast, and finding my way in the art world, and so I had a website up for that. And I, at one point, when the sort of excitement of the book died down, I couldn't do it anymore. I decided Instagram is enough for me. So I would say, I kind of use Instagram. And then if I've got something I want to put up, I put up on, even on Facebook or on YouTube, there's YouTube clips of stuff that I've done.
Yeah.
But yeah, I kind of just let the world decide how that should go. I can't get too bothered with that. And, I appear sometimes in TV shows and films that I don't always watch or promote. I'm not the greatest promoter of stuff that I've done. If I was, I'd probably be more successful. But yeah, I don't know. I'm always just entrenched in my next little project, and I don't know. I define success really differently than most people, and it's kind of like when I do something, I kind of just let go of it, and it doesn't always have a home, as an end result.
I actually really like that. I have had the opportunity to work on a couple of public art projects here in Plymouth, and they were kind of like these fiberglass lobsters, and they selected artists to paint them, and then they put them all around the town. And the idea was to get people to kind of walk all over looking for all the lobsters. And, people were like, oh, yours had some damage, or, it's kind of leaning, and, are you going to go fix it? I'm like, no. And like, it belongs to the world. Like it's on its own.
Right.
And like, as soon as I, like the whole time working on it, I'm like, there's a real world chance that this is going to get stolen or destroyed. And I was kind of okay with that. To me, that was kind of part of it. If it got stolen, then there's a good story, and
yeah. That's great.
So
I think it's it's all kind of a create and destroy thing for me. Like I sort of get an idea in mind, and once it is, I in my mind, however, I think it's complete. I'm not somebody who, I don't really linger. I try not to spend too much time thinking about, past or previous things, because it just takes me to a dark place. And besides, I think you in my opinion, you get one life, and you just want to do as many fun and interesting projects as you can before you got to sign off. And you can't do that when you're looking back too much.
That's phenomenal advice. Are you working on something now that you can talk about, or?
Let me think. I've got to be working on several projects. Yeah, nothing.
Nothing ready.
Nothing ready.
Yeah,
but I am preparing to tape my hour magic show, kind of once and for all. Just make a time capsule of the show that I've been doing for 20 years, and in some ways put it on the shelf and just let it exist as this thing that I've traveled the world doing and put a lot of time and energy into. It just seems like a good time to send that one off. So that's pretty much that. And then there's the book that I wrote. My memoir is called Strange Cures, and there's aspects of that I'm rewriting, chapters and passages that I'm rewriting for maybe a stand-up show. So it's kind of continues in the same memoir-y performative world of what I would like to do.
Awesome. Well, Rob, I want to say thank you for taking the time to talk to us. This was genuinely a ton of fun. I feel like we're pretty on the same vibe. Love music and performing in all sorts of different ways, and so it's really great. When you are ready to promote something, please feel free to reach out, and we'll get you back on the show.
Hey, thank you. It was really this was a pleasure. It's a lot of fun.
Outstanding. And so we'll catch all you listeners again back here next week. And until then, we'll talk to you later. And thanks for checking out the show today, listeners. If you enjoyed the content today, you can go over to patreon.com/Inebri-art to support the show. You can join over there for just a few dollars a month and help us provide this fun content that you just checked out. You can also email us at inebri-art.com with your questions, complaints, and concerns, or you can find us on all social medias at Inebri-art or at Inebri-art6 on Instagram. And also don't forget to check out our other shows, Bar Talk Podcast, Old Colony Cast, Inebri-art, and all the other shows on the Inebri-art Network, which you can find at inebri-art.com. Thanks again for listening.